Hello, and welcome to Mr. Quaker's Teachers. In today's lesson, I'll be providing a detailed analysis of the poem Those Winter Sundays by Robert Hayden. My analysis will be presented with rolling annotations of the stanzas, lines, and important words and phrases in the poem. I'll emphasize the themes, literary devices, both figurative and poetic, tone, structure, language, etc. of the poem. To purchase the course that provides stanza by stanza, line by line, and word for word written and video analysis of all the 15 poems in the IGCSE anthology, visit mrquakersteaches.com. The written course has been particularly helpful for students sitting the IGCSE because it gives clear guidance on their approved writing styles. Without further ado, let's demystify Those Winter Sundays by Robert Hayden. First, let's speak about the poet. Robert Hayden was born on August 4th, 1913 and died on February 25th, 1980. He was an American poet, essayist, and educator. He also served as a consultant in poetry to the Library of Congress from 1976 to 1978, a role today known as the U.S. Poet Laureate. He was the first African American writer to hold the office. Now, a brief detail or summary of the poem Those Winter Sundays. Those Winter Sundays deals with the interaction that Hayden and other members of his family, especially Hayden, had with his hardworking, dedicated father, and his attitude of irreverence and almost disrespect with which he dealt with his father. But in the final two lines of the poem, we see that there's this sense of epiphany. Hayden comes to this epiphany when he becomes older and realizes that the actions that his father took when he was younger was because of love, an act of commitment and dedication. And so when Hayden begins to imagine or have a rethink of his attitude towards his father, he breaks down. And we see that with the use of rhetorical question in the last two lines of the poem. Now let's dive into the poem, but let's first read it. Those Winter Sundays by Robert Hayden. Sundays too, my father got up early and put his clothes on in the blue-black cold. Then, with cracked hands that ached from labor in the weekday made bank fire blaze. No one ever thanked him. I'd wake and hear the cold splintering, breaking. When the rooms were warm, he'd call, and slowly I would rise and dress, fearing the chronic angers of that house. Speaking indifferently to him, who had driven out the cold and polished my good shoes as well. What did I know? What did I know of love's austere and lonely offices? So we see here that the poem is in three stanzas. The first stanza has 5 lines. The third stanza also has five lines. But then in the middle, we see 4 lines. So the poem is 14 lines in total. The very first thing we see about the poem is the word Sundays too. So Sunday, which is known, worldwide, as especially in the Christian countries, as traditionally a day of rest, we are told here that even on that day, Hayden reports that his father would wake up early. So while some other people are resting because of the work that they've done from Mondays to Saturday, we are told here that even on Sundays, Hayden remembers that his father got up early. And the use of the word too, Sundays too, reveals that the persona was up early on all the other days of the week, presumably to go to work. So from Monday to Saturday, his father would wake up early, and that's like his father's the way that his father deals with time. He would wake up early. Now this is really important because we are going to see the ideas of father-son relationship as the poem develops, And also the fact that Hayden's father was a very dutiful father and was a very responsible parent. And he tried all he could to make sure that his family enjoys a very, amiable and then warm sense of interaction. Now, another thing we are going to see is the weather. The weather plays a very important, role in this poem. And we see that in the second line when we are told that, and put on his clothes in the blue-black cold. So while the weather was still cold, Hayden's father would dress up. And Hayden describes the situation or the weather or the nature of the weather as blue-black. Now this is really important because the word cold not only reveals tactile imagery, which is imagery of feeling, but we also see the idea of the idiomatic expression being beaten blue and black, black and blue. So we see here that the father had to deal not only with, I'm sure, the idea of frostbite, but then it was almost as if he was being boxed in and dealt brutally assaulted by the cold. So the weather was extremely frigid. It is in that circumstance that Hayden's father, wakes up, and then he does so early. We're also told about some of the things that the man has to do with. We are told in the third line that then, with cracked hands that ached. So cracked hands that ache provides visual and tactile imagery. Cracked hands is visual imagery because we see that the father's hand has been broken by the weather and then I'm sure by hard work. We also see tactile imagery with the word ache. So you can the father has to endure a lot of pains. So tactile imagery ache produces visual imagery of the person's hands and tactile imagery of the pains he lived with. So here we are told that it's not only the weather that Hayden's father has to deal with, but he has to also deal with some of the effects of the weather and hard work on him. So that he was in constant pain. And if a parent is in constant pain, usually what will happen is that the person will desist from taking on a task. But instead, his father, because of his dedication to his family, would still wake up early and try to sort his family out. And we are told that from labor in the weekday weather made, the word labor that suggests that the persona's occupation, that's Hayden's father's occupation, was physically exhausting and arduous. It was akin to being sentenced to jail with hard labor. And this is really important because in the past, when people will be sent to prison, sometimes they are sent to prison with hard labor. So here, he doesn't speak about his father's job as like an occupation. He speaks about his father's job as labor, which means his father had to exert himself a lot. And we are told that he did this throughout the week. And we see that the use of the word weekday. So weekday suggests that Hayden's father worked on every day of the week, even though we are not told if he also worked on Saturday, but there's a chance that even on Saturday the man had to work. And we are told again the condition. He says in the weekday weather. So in whatever day that it was, his father still had to contend with the weather. So his job was not only arduous. He didn't have to only do it on all the days of the week, but he also had to deal with the frigid nature of the weather, which made every task that he had to do even more difficult. We also see the alliteration in the fourth line of the poem, and we see that in the repetition of the word we in weekday and weather. So the alliteration of the we there, the sound there provides auditory imagery of the sound that usually cold, frigid air usually makes, especially as it speeds are all speeds up by. So here Hayden wants the reader to hear in their mind's ear the sound of the cold weather. And we are told here that the father banked fire. He banked fire. The word bank there is a pun. What that means is that the word can be explained in two ways. The word bank suggests that the weather that Hayden's father put up was a fire that was long lasting. So it's like a bank. The way sometimes people store, he raised this thing very high and made sure that the fire was constant and it was there for a long time. So bank, fire, blaze. And the word bank can also be explained as the long-lasting parental warmth. So his father not only literally lit a fire in the house, but also tried to expose his family to warmth. And we are told that bank fire blaze. The use of the word blaze there, the natural heat and the warmth and dedication of the persona, it speaks about Hayden's father's dedication to his family. So blaze, the natural heat and the warmth and dedication of the persona was clearly expressed for everyone to see. If something is blazing, it means that it can be seen. And his father's love and dedication for the family was something that was exposed to everybody. Now, in the first 5 lines of the poem, before the full stop, before the word blaze and then the full stop, we see that Hayden expresses to the reader everything that his father does. Now, we see the response of the dependents or those who were in the house. We are told that no one ever thanked him. And that is really, a depressing picture, because we see a sense of ingratitude by the occupants of the house. No one ever. So, first of all, no one there speaks about everybody in the house, or there was nobody who was exempted from, showing unappreciation or ingratitude to the father. But then he also says ever, which means that not even once did the persona or Hayden's father receive a form of appreciation for the dedication and the effort that he had sort of exerted in his family. And we see that they dealt with him with silent treatment and also with disrespect. In the first stanza of the poem, we also see the use of enjambment as well. And you see that in the flow of words from the first line into the second, and then from the second into the third, continuously until the end of the poem, of the stanza. The use of enjambment by Hayden shows that Hayden's thoughts were very fluid, and he is able to remember in very minute details the actions and the things that his father did to better their life. So the use of enjambment also exposes to the reader that the father took multiple actions at a go. So he didn't break. So when he wakes up, he puts on his clothes, then with the cracked hands, he didn't take time to think about the cracked hands, but he just went on and then he did what had to be done, which is to spread a lot of warmth in the house. The poet uses more than 4 lines of the first stanza to review what his father did to improve the ambience of their house and the condition of their lives, but only uses 5 words to review that as beneficiaries, that is Hayden and the rest of the pack, that the residents of the house responded with ingratitude. And this is a really striking image, because we see that even today, many people tend to react with ingratitude towards the efforts and things that their parents do for them. And so this poem calls to question our ideas of parental responsibilities and then the role of children. And one of the key things that we see here is the lack of gratitude by those who received these gifts from Hayden's father. Another striking point I want to mention is the fact that when it comes to the weather was cold, but then also the condition of the house in terms of the relationship that the occupants had with each other. There was also cold. There was also this cold as well. So we have like literal cold and also emotional coldness towards each other. In the second stanza of the poem, Hayden reports, "I would wake." So we see that his father woke up in the first line of the first stanza, but Hayden wakes up in the second line, in the second stanza, the first line of the second stanza. Now Hayden gets out of bed in the second stanza. This reveals that he woke up a great while after his father. Now this is really striking, because in most homes, children have to take certain responsibilities, and then the parents have to come and sort of benefit from the responsibility that have been taken. But we see here that Hayden's father was so dedicated that he tried to, in all his might, to make the house a very warm place for everybody. Now we hear that the Hayden reports that "hear the cold." The use of the word "hear the cold" there reveals the frigid nature of the place, and the fact that it was something that the family had to contend with a lot. The house was so frigid that Hayden reports that he could hear the cold, not only feel it. So he could hear the cold. So you can see here that there's this sense of auditory imagery about the cold. And the first thing that he reports is that he could hear the cold when he wakes up splintering. Splintering suggests that the cold broke in small bits. Because the cold had already held the house in sway. So in order to break away from, the cold, he had to do that in minute bits. And he says, suggests that the cold broke in small bits from the fringes, from the edges. And then later on, he continues and says, breaking. So after a bit of splintering, then there is breaking. Breaking suggests that it began to break in larger and more sizable chunks. So after the house had warmed a bit, then it suddenly the warmth of the house just improves very drastically, and that's why he presents that with breaking. Then Hayden continues that when the rooms were warm, he would call. So Hayden's father called for the inhabitants of the house after the house was warm. So he wanted to prepare the place very nicely before he asked the occupants or the rest of the household to come out. And we also see the alliteration of the W sound as well in when the rooms were warm. The alliteration of the W sound provides auditory imagery of the warm air spreading in the house. So it just spreads, and it's as if it spreads with Hayden's father's voice. He called. The patriarch of the house, that's Hayden's father, it was his voice that sort of heralded or announced that the house is now hospitable, so everybody can feel free and have a good time. And Hayden continues that, and I would rise, and slowly I would rise and rest. So we see a lack of agency in Hayden's attitude after his father would call. He says, and slowly I would rise and rest. So he treated the lack of agency in Hayden's response reveals his disrespect and disregard for his father. He continues that fearing. The use of the word fearing introduces the theme of the toxic family life. The family was a very toxic place, or the household was a place that was very toxic in terms of the kind of relationship that they had with each other. Fearing also suggests that Hayden was filled with trepidation and fear. And he describes that what he was afraid of was the chronic angers of the house. The use of the word chronic is really striking because chronic reveals that the anger of the house was constant. It was a constant feature in the familiar relationship that they had with each other. And he also says there were angers. Now, the use of the word angers, which is not a word that should be pluralized, reveals that there were multiple people in the house who expressed anger. It was almost as if everybody threw a temper tantrum from time to time. The plural anger suggests that multiple people regularly acted in rage towards each other. And Hayden describes it as that house. The use of that house there reveals that Hayden does not remember where he lived with fondness. And the use of the word house is also important because rather than describing the place as a home, it describes it as a house, which means it was just a place that, housed him, that he was just there. But then there was no familiar or warmth or interaction between the family in such a way that, he had a good time. And that house also has this image of, a place that has negative connotations and a place that everybody knows is a place that, bad things happen. We also see the enjambment that leads to the fusion of the second stanza into the third. And we see Hayden's first, verbal interaction with his father. He says that speaking indifferently to him. Speaking indifferently to him suggests that Hayden spoke to his father with contempt. And he also creates the effect that Hayden would, when his father spoke to him, Hayden wouldn't sometimes, wait to listen properly or respond in a way that was respectful to his father, but you just walk out on him. And he describes his father as the person who had driven out the cold. So we see that Hayden realizes that his father had to be really committed and dedicated to the exercise of driving out the cold. And this driving out the cold is personification. Driving out the cold creates the effect that Hayden's father physically fought the cold to dismiss it from the house. So he had to be really strong. He had to be really dedicated. He had to put everything in it of that he had in before he could push out the code. And it continues in the third line of the third stanza that and reveals the use of enjambment and reveals that Hayden's father moved on to polish his son's shoes as soon as he had heated the house. So immediately he drives out the code. The next thing that he does is pick Hayden's shoe and polish the shoe. And this is important because we see a switch in father-son role. So Hayden is supposed to be the one that polishes his father's shoe, but it's his father that is rather polishing his shoe. And we see the switch in role. And this is really important because Hayden's father's decision to polish Hayden's shoe reveals that he does not only want to do something that will benefit every member of the house, but he wants to do something that will be of specific benefit to Hayden because the shoes belong to Hayden. So the personal decision to polish his son's shoes revealed that he wanted to do something that would specifically benefit his son and allow them to develop a close and warmer relationship or a warm relationship. So his father went out of his way to do something that will be beneficial specifically to Hayden, just so that they can have some form of relationship, especially as a father and son. So we see that kind of topsy-turvy, cold relationship between the father and the son. Now, there's a falter in the last two lines of the poem. The very first thing that Hayden says is, "What did I know?" So the question, "What did I know?" reveals that Hayden now realizes that the way he treated his father was wrong, or the manner in which he treated his father was wrong. It also highlights that he acted in innocence and was naive. So when someone says, "What did I know?" it shows two things. Or Hayden's attitude of saying, "What did I know?" it reveals to the reader two ideas. That first of all, Hayden has come to a new realization from the previous one, and then it also shows that Hayden understands that he was naive and also ignorant in his attitude towards his father. We also see that he repeats the word what did I know again a second time in the fourth line. And that is the word that sort of takes the entire line. What did I know? So the word "what did I know" is actually repeated twice. Now, the repetition of "what did I know" emphasizes Hayden's regret. So we see that he realizes that he was acting in ignorance, and then he was naive, and then he also realized that he treated his father wrongly. But now we also see that he wants to emphasize to the reader that he regrets his actions towards his father. So he regrets his actions towards his father. He also reveals that he has now come to realize that he treated his father poorly, but he now realizes that it was monumentally foolish for him to have done so. So what he did, he was very wrong. The repetition of "what did I know" also highlights Hayden's epiphany and his realization that he was personally responsible for his actions. So he says, "What did I know?" He didn't say what did we know. So he takes personal responsibility for the things that he did wrong to his father. And this point is seen in the use of the word his use of the word "I." So he's speaking for himself. Now, we see finally that Hayden ends the poem with a rhetorical question. And the use of a rhetorical question is really intense because it reveals very vividly the emotion that Hayden felt. And he says, "What did I know of love's austere and lonely offices?" So the rhetorical question there is usually used to evoke emotion. And we see that here as well. So he says, "What did I know of love's austere and lonely offices?" Hayden's use of rhetorical question exposes his deep emotion and his intense remorse. So Hayden is very remorseful about the way he treated his father. Of love's reveals that Hayden now realizes that his father's dedication to their family was guided by love. So everything that Hayden's father did for them was guided by love and parental responsibility. And Hayden continues that there's this office that love owns, and then it says it's both austere, and it's also lonely. The use of the word austere reveals that parental love is difficult and hard. It also suggests that it is selfless. So Hayden realizes that his father was extremely selfless in the actions, and that's why he uses the word austere. When something is austere, it's difficult to do, but his father did it anyway. And he also finally adds that it is lonely. The use of lonely reveals that when it comes to parental love, it is unappreciated and it's overlooked. You do not have like somebody that you're going to partner with, because more often than not, the people to whom, especially as a parent, you show your love to do not understand what you're doing for them. So they sort of overlook your dedication, and in this instance, Hayden realized that he overlooked his father's love, commitment, and his willingness to suffer in spite of the pains and all of that, to go out of his way to provide an ambient environment, not only for everybody in the house, but for Hayden specifically, especially with the polishing of Hayden's shoes. Offices reveal that fatherhood entails carrying out practical duties. So when they speak about practical duties, what that means is that fatherhood is not merely a title. It is about work. It is also about undertaking actions that will benefit your entire household. So when it comes to being a father, your actions is something that benefits everybody in the house, and more often than not, you think about yourself lastly. So by the end of the poem, we see that Hayden begins with his attitude towards his father and how he wakes up later on and how he speaks indifferently to him, and then finally comes to the realization, I think now that Hayden must have been older, that he could have handled or done things a bit more differently. When it comes to the structure of the poem, like I mentioned already, the poem has 14 lines in total. And then the poem is also a verse paragraph because the stanzas have an equal number of lines. So stanza 1 and 3 have 5 lines, and then stanza 2 has 4 lines. So it's a verse paragraph. And we also see that the poem also lacks a rhyme scheme. And we see that because the lack of rhyme scheme shows that Hayden's relationship with his father was not a relationship that was warm, or generally the ambience of the house was not it wasn't warm, and so they had no rhythm. Even though Hayden employs a bit of alliteration to expose mainly the weather and how powerful the winds were and the frigid condition of the house was. When it comes to the themes of the poem, we see ideas like fatherhood, father-son relationship, and then we see that in Hayden's relationship with his father, the burdens of fatherhood or the responsibilities that go with fatherhood. We see ideas like family life, the appreciation of parental sacrifice, maturity, and the realization of wrong over time. So by the end of the poem, the last 2 lines of the poem, we see maturity in Hayden and then the realization that he had done something wrong. And we also see dutiful father and then parental responsibility. So these are some of the ideas that are exposed in those winter Sundays in terms of the themes. And usually the IGCSE questions usually are built around the theme. So one of the questions you can find is, how does Robert Hayden present a striking father-son relationship in those winter Sundays? And the ideas about how his father works every day of the week, Sundays too, and all of that are ideas that have to be presented, and how Hayden responds to his father's dedication. You can purchase a course, or the course that provides all the details about the IGCSE poem at mrquickersteaches.com. The courses allow you to customize how you learn, and it also provides stanza by stanza, line by line, and word for word analysis of all the 15 poems in the IGCSE anthology. So you can have all the details that you need. You also find analysis of the prose and drama components, characters, themes, conflicts, etc. And then information on the unseen paper if you're also writing the unseen paper. You can also book private tuition for the Cambridge IGCSE and A-level in English language, English literature, geography, and history. So if you need a bit more help, you can reach out and then you can book a lesson. You can also join our tribe for the IGCSE on Telegram at Mr. Quickest Teaches IGCSE Literature. So here you have it. Those Winter Sundays by Robert Hayden has been demystified. Until next time, Bye-bye.